Hello, I'm David Snopek from Snopek Games, and this is part 2 in a course about using GitLab CI with a game project built using the Godot game engine. So quick review, what did we do last time? Well, we created a .gitlab-ci.yaml file for our test project to automatically export to Windows, Linux, macOS, HTML5, and to deploy the HTML5 version to GitLab pages. And in this part, we're going to be starting from that basis. So if you haven't watched the previous part, I highly recommend you go back and watch that part and follow along, because we're going to be using all of the stuff that we set up in that part in this part. So really quickly, what is itch.io? We're going to be talking about deploying to itch.io, but what is it? I'm assuming if you're watching this video, you have an idea of what itch.io is, but in the off chance that you don't, let's just take 30 seconds really quick and talk about what it is. So it's a storefront for buying games, as well as game assets and apps and some books and some tabletop RPG rule sets and stuff, but mostly for buying video games. It's kind of similar-ish to Steam in that you buy video games there. It has an app on your desktop that can download those games and launch them for you, but it has a couple of important differences. First of all, it's got this super strong indie game focus. Of course, there's some games that are on both itch.io and Steam, but then there's this whole other world of indie games that only exists on itch.io or other smaller platforms. The revenue share is different. Steam always takes 30% and the rest goes to the game creator. itch.io lets you set what percentage you want to share with itch.io. So you could set it to 30% like Steam, or you could set it to 10% or 0% and share nothing with itch.io, which is a really interesting model. It also has this pay what you want thing where the creator is really setting a minimum price, and when you're buying it, you can throw in a little more as a tip to the creator. And it also hosts most of the world's game jams. So the Godot Wild Game Jam that I've participated in a couple of times is hosted there, as well as hundreds or maybe even thousands of other game jams. So there's this whole like big game dev, game jam community that's also circling around itch.io. But for me, itch.io is kind of like a social network, but for game developers and gamer enthusiasts. So if there's a game developer that I really respect, I can follow them on itch.io and see all the games that they've made, see all the games that they're working on, look at all the dev logs for all of those games. And the gamers there too are really interesting. Like, you get really constructive, positive feedback from the gamers there, who have also like kind of more patience for indie games and these sort of smaller experimental things on itch.io. So it's just a really cool community. I love itch.io. So what are we going to do in this part? Well, we're going to set up our project with 2 Git branches. The master branch, which is going to be kind of the version of the game that we're deploying to users, the stable version of the game. And then the develop branch, which is the in-development version of the game that will be eventually merged back into master. So I just did the part 5 of my Godot and Git series talking about branching and merging. So if you're not familiar with how to do that in Git, I highly recommend watching that. But the idea is that generally when you're working on a new feature, like we did in that video, you'd make like a feature branch to work on that, and when it's ready, you'll merge it into your develop branch. And the develop branch will then get, further testing from your team or QA or maybe like a beta group of your users. And then when it's finally stable, you'll merge it into master. All commits on all branches will make Windows, Linux, macOS, and HTML5 builds via GitLab CI. That's what we set up in the last part of this series. Only commits on the develop branch will publish the HTML5 version to GitLab pages. So the idea is you can go to the GitLab pages for your project at any time and play the latest build on the develop branch, which is something that your team will know that that's where they go to see the latest beta stuff. I was going to say stable stuff, but that's not quite right. The stable is the master branch, but the features that are going to end up in the stable branch soon. And only commits on the master branch will publish the builds to itch.io. So let's get that set up. I'm going to switch to my Windows VM, which is here. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make a project on itch.io. So this is assuming you already have an account on itch.io. If you don't, it's super easy to make one. It's like making an account for anything else. You just click the register button up here, give a username, password, email, all that normal stuff. Down here, there's these checkboxes for I'm interested in playing games or I'm interested in distributing content. You can change this later, and it's actually possible that you already have an itch.io account, but you only checked the first box. And if that's the case, you need to go into your settings and also check the second box so that you can get access to the creator tools. But if you're setting up your account for the first time, be sure to click this box right away so you'll already have access to the creator tools. But I already have an account, so let's go to my logged in web browser here. And if you click the drop down by your name in the upper right hand corner, and then go down to upload new project in this create section. So this create section is what you will get by checking that box that you want to be a creator, and what you won't see if you created your account without checking that box. So click the drop down underneath create, go to upload new project. We're going to give our project a title. We're going to call it Git Test 1 like we've been calling it elsewhere. And when we click out of this text box here, it will make a project URL out of that. This piece of the URL for your game is very important. It's kind of like the internal name for your game. Make sure this is a value that you want, because this is going to appear in all of the URLs for your project, but also take note of it because we'll need it later. One more thing we are going to change. Under kind of project, we're going to change it from downloadable to HTML. That's what will allow the web build to actually run in the browser on itch.io. It's sort of confusing because HTML isn't exclusive. Like, it can be HTML and have downloads, but if it's set to downloadable, then it can only have downloads and not the HTML player. So we're going to switch it to HTML. And down at the bottom, we are going to make sure that the visibility and access is set to draft, because we don't want people to see our game page until we are done. So let's click Save and View Page. And we now have a project on itch.io. So the next step is we need to get our API key from itch.io. So to do that, we go to again to the drop down in the upper right hand corner, go to Settings, and on the left hand side, scroll down in the developer section, click API keys. Now you'll probably not have any API keys here. I already have a couple. You might have one if you already use the itch.io desktop app, but in any case, we're going to create a new key. So click the Generate New API Key button, and that will create a new key up here, which we are going to view. One thing to note is that API keys are something you need to keep secret. If someone else got a hold of your API key, they could do stuff on your itch.io account that you probably don't want them to do. So this is confidential information. Take care to not expose it publicly, which is actually what I'm going to do in a second. I'm going to click this view button and expose it to the world, but don't worry about me. I will revoke this key before the video is up. So if you're watching this key is already worthless. So we are going to copy this API key, the full thing, after we click the view link. And then we are going to go to our GitLab project page for our project. And on the left-hand side, we're going to go to Settings and then CI/CD and expand the variable section, and then go to Add Variable. And in the key text area, we're going to type butler _ API _ key. And in the value box, we're going to paste that API key that we got. Now, there's a couple of flags down here which are important. So the protect variable, that means this variable will only be put into GitLab CI builds that are on protected branches. You can configure any branch in your project to be protected or to not be protected, but a protected branch is one that only people with a certain role in your project will have permission to push to. And this is important because theoretically, if you're able to modify the .gitlab-ci.yaml file, you can get access to any of these variables in here. And as we've already talked about, this API key is a secret. We want to keep this one secret. So someone could add a line to the GitLab CI configuration to like take this variable and email it to them, email it to themselves. And we don't want people to do sketchy things like that. So if you say only certain people have the ability to push there, that sort of assumes that those people are going to be reviewing changes before they're pushing them into this branch, and so they can check that the GitLab-ci.yaml file wasn't modified with malicious code. So we want to keep this one protected, so we keep this flag checked, and then we're also going to check this mask variable flag. What this does is if your build anywhere accidentally prints out this variable, it won't get saved in the log of all the commands that the build did. GitLab CI will look for this value and then replace it with a bunch of stars. So the idea there is if you accidentally print it out, GitLab CI has your back and it will wipe it out, so your logs of the build won't expose this secret information. So then we click Add Variable. And now we need to actually update our .gitlab-ci.yaml file. So let me minimize these. And I'm going to open up the folder with our test project in it. And I'm going to find our .gitlab-ci.yaml file, right-click, go to Edit with Notepad++. And here you'll see all of the stuff we put in the last part. We have our Windows export, our Linux export, our macOS export, the HTML5 export, and then where we're deploying to GitLab pages. We're going to make one tiny change to what we did last time. Like we talked about in the beginning, we're going to have it so that only the develop branch deploys to GitLab pages. So we need to change this only master and change it to only develop. So before we had it set up to only deploy to GitLab pages on the master branch, now we're going to have it only deploy to GitLab pages on the develop branch. And then next, we are going to add a new section to deploy to itch.io. And we're going to start by copy-pasting that from the cheat sheet, which you can find a link to below the video. And we will talk through what each part of this means. But first, let's just copy it and paste it. So the new build is called itch. Oops. It's called itch, and it's part of the deploy stage, just like the pages build. It has these dependencies. It's dependent on the web, Linux, macOS, and Windows build. And what that means is it will make sure that those builds run first before this build is run, but also that their artifacts will be pulled into this build. And that's important because you know, each time a build is run, it's always done from a clean environment, so the artifacts from the previous builds won't be there, but also all of these builds might be run on different servers. Like GitLab CI has a whole farm of servers, and each build might be run on, you know, a different server, and so it needs to know that it has to pull in these artifacts that were built previously down to this new clean environment on this probably new server in order to use them. And then this next part, the script, this is the actual commands to run for this build, which are all commands for a command line tool called Butler. And Butler is itch.io's command line tool for uploading builds. So we have a Butler command for each build that we want to do, which goes butler push the directory with the files that we're going to deploy, which is what was built in these other builds and then pulled in from the artifact. And then this last part is first an identifier for the game, which we're using this itch.io name variable, which we'll set in a moment, and then a colon, and then the name of an upload channel. So the way that I have them set up here is that each upload channel is the name of the platform, so web, Linux, macOS, whatever, -stable. And this is just my personal convention with the idea that maybe you'll want to also have like a -beta set of builds. So you could have stable builds and beta builds and something like that. But it's really unimportant. You could name these channels whatever you want. The only thing that you gain by putting the platform in there is that itch.io will use the name of the channel to guess what platform your channel is meant to be for. But even if you put, you know, some crazy made up thing in there, you could always go into itch.io and edit the upload channel and say this channel is specifically for Windows or for macOS or whatever. So anyway, in order for this to work, like I said, we need to set this itch.io name variable. So we're going to go up to the top of the file, and under the variables section here, we're going to do itch.io_name : and then we have to give our itch.io account name, which in my case is dsnowpeck, slash the URL part of the project name, which is git test1. So yeah, so this should be set to go, and we have this one set to only run on the master branch like we talked about at the beginning. So I'm going to save this and close it, and then let's go back to our project directory. I'm going to right click and go to git bash here to open up the git command line. Run git status. We see that .gitlab-ci.yaml is modified. We're going to do git space commit space -a to commit those changes. Say added GitLab CI deployment to itch.io. And we'll save that and close this. It created the commit. Then we need to git push. All right, we'll go back to the GitLab project, go to the CI/CD tab, and we'll see there is a new pipeline running. If we click that, we'll see that we have these 4 export jobs and then a new itch.io deploy job that's going to run after they're done. So I'm going to fast forward to the end when the jobs are done. All right, so all of the export jobs have finished. The itch.io deployment job is finished. Here is the log from that build. You can see here where it's downloading the artifacts for each of its dependent builds, like I was talking about earlier. And then here you can see Butler running. It has this little notice about how there's a new version available. I think that's because we're using the version from this Docker image, but the advantage is that Butler is built into this Docker image that we are using. So we didn't have to do anything special to install Butler. Anyway, you can see that it's saying running for channel, web stable, pushing first build, and has a little bit of information about what's being pushed. And it outputs basically the same stuff for each of these builds that it's pushing. So now if we switch over to itch.io, and if we go back to our project page, let's edit it. And now you'll see all of these uploads in here under the upload section. So we are going to go through and we are going to configure some of the metadata about each of these uploads and clean them up and rearrange them a little bit. So this is the web build. We're going to change the display name to HTML5. We have to click this box. This file will be played in the browser so that itch.io knows that this is the build to put into the web player. The next is the Linux build. We'll change the display name to just Linux. The next one is the Mac OS build. We'll change it to just Mac OS X. Same for the Windows build. And then make sure when you're looking at these different builds that for Linux, the little penguin is checked. For Mac OS, the little apple is checked. And for Windows, the little Windows icon is checked. And then we're going to rearrange them a little bit because I always like to have the Windows build at the top since most game players are playing on Windows. So it will show up in the downloads as Windows, Linux, Mac OS X. And now if we go and save this and then view the page, we can see it's loading up the game to be played in the web browser. Let's just make sure that that works. All right, there we go. We have our little example game is playable in the browser, and we have the 3 versions here, Windows, Linux, Mac OS. So that step that we just did where we went through and edited the names and made sure that they were set for the right platforms and rearranged them, that's something that you only have to do once. Now that we've done that, assuming that Butler is always using the exact same channel name, itch.io will know that that specific channel, like the Windows one, is meant to be Windows. It's going to be called just Windows, not the crazy file name. It's going to be in this order. So you only have to set up that one time. And from now on, anytime you push to the master branch, it will just automatically, after a minute or two, upload a new version of the game without you having to think about it at all. The last thing that I want to do before we are done, though, is we had said originally that we were going to have the develop branch push to GitLab pages. So we need to make that develop branch. In the part 5 of the Godot and Git series, we talked all about branches. We're going to be running some of the commands that we learned in that part. So we're going to do git space checkout space -b space develop. And this is going to create a new develop branch. And now we are going to push it to GitLab. So we'll do git space push space -u space origin space develop. All right, now if we go back to GitLab, which is this one, and go to CI/CD pipelines, there will be a new pipeline running on the develop branch. And if we click through to it, you'll see that there are the export builds, and then under deploy rather than itch.io, we have just pages. So our project is now set up so that anything you push to the develop branch goes to GitLab pages for your team to test, and anything you push to the master branch gets deployed to itch.io for your users. So please let me know if there's anything I missed or anything unclear or anything in particular you want to see in future episodes. Write a comment below or send me a message. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.